Alright, in this unit we're going to be looking at agriculture and how there's different types of agriculture processes and how soil and agriculture are going to be tied together. So let's go ahead and get started. From the last time that we talked, we know that soil is that top layer. It's setting on top of the crust. It's a very small, thin layer. It's made up of that organic and inorganic material, minerals, humus, those types of things. The important material that's going to be in the soil are your minerals, like your nitrogens, phosphates, those chemicals needed, those important nutrients needed for plant growth. You've also got bacteria, you've got worms, you've got other microbes that are going to help process that soil. So just a quick review reminding us what soil is and its different parts. We know how soil forms. We've looked at that before, so just a quick recap on this. We know there are three types of weathering that can affect how soil forms: chemical, physical, and biological weathering. And we know that there are 5 major components that factor into this type of soil you have. The parent material that makes that soil, whether it be sedimentary rock, igneous rock, the organisms found in that soil, worms or other microbes, bacteria. The climate in the area, is it more arid? Is it more tropical? The topography, mountains, plains, and then the time of year. Obviously the position of the earth and the tilt in relation to the sun. Is it spring? Is it summer? That's all going to tie into the types of soil that can be formed. Alright, so as far as this weathering aspect, soil can be formed based on 3 types of weathering processes. You've got chemical, physical, and biological. Chemical is going to be a type of weathering that's going to use water. It's also going to use organic acids that's going to come in and help react, make minerals, make glue to hold the soil together. That's one type of weathering process. Physical, just straight erosion through wind, water. Temperature changes can cause rocks to break apart, so that would be a physical type of weathering. And then biological, just straight weathering created by plants and animals. So those are the 3 major types of weathering that can have an impact on how rocks are transformed into soil. Quick review again, we know what erosion is. We know once weathering occurs, erosion is going to be that movement of those sediments from one place to another. We know that it's done by water, wind, and ice. Water being the most common type of factor that is going to play into erosion. Alright, now let's start looking at the nutrients within our soil. We know water is the big one. Water is the number one. And remember the lab that we did last week, testing our soil for nutrients. We know that we need nitrogen, we need potassium or that potash, that mixture, and we need phosphorus. Those are the 3 major nutrients, along with water, that plants need. We know nitrogen for protein growth, building of proteins, making of chlorophyll for plants to go through photosynthesis. The potassium needed for growth, needed for the plants that produce fruits or vegetables for their seeds, for growth of that, and immunity. And then your phosphorus is going to help build strong root structures to allow plants to break through harder soil materials to reach nutrients and to reach water. Helps in seed development for your fruits and vegetables and for your non-fruit bearing plants. And then that also is going to tie into immunity to help fight against disease. So these are the 3 major, along with water, and their benefits or why plants need them. Alright, so little wrap up on soil. We know it's important. We know we need it. We need that healthy soil, that loamy soil, that granular soil to help grow our food. It helps cleanse water. Soil is very good at filtering water, giving us clean water. Soil is also going to be there to help reduce pollution. It takes in carbon dioxide. It's part of our carbon sinks along with our forests and our oceans. And it helps filter wastes out and store those wastes. And those wastes can be processed and used by other organisms. All right, let's get into food production. We know that food is produced by two main sources. You've got your primary animals and primary plants. Fish, beef, pork, and chicken, primary animals for our food sources, and our primary plant sources of food would be wheat, corn, and rice. Now, major types of agriculture. You've got industrialized, traditional subsistence, plantation, and animal farming. These are the four major groupings of agriculture. Our industrialized agriculture is the most common. You've got big corporations that have mass farming over miles and miles and miles of territory. Primary method, monocultures, where you have these single hybrid crops that are grown over extensive miles, is going to be done through industrialized agriculture. The cornfields that we have, that's one type of hybrid corn that is grown over large areas, and that corn we're going to get into later, but corn is a very valuable commodity, not only in a large number of different types of food products, but also in non-food products. And like I said, we'll get into corn later. Your traditional subsistence, this is family farming. Okay, this is the traditional family farming, maybe not using machinery, not on a grand scale, not on a big scale. This is small time family farming that usually produces just enough for the family and maybe just a little bit extra to sell as profit. This is what farming used to be. Now our farming has become more industrialized. You do have plantation in other parts of the world where you have this large-scale farming of these cash crops like sorghum, barley, and these are done. Plantation farming is mainly done to have a crop built, harvested by a larger group of people, and then it is shipped out for profit only. And then you have animal farming, which is raising of animals to slaughter and sell for meat, like chicken farms, cattle farms, pork farms. Those are the major types of animal farms that you'll have, and they grow them specifically for slaughter and for meat production, that you buy those things like in grocery stores and that type of thing. All right, a nice little map that kind of gives you a snapshot of where on the planet these different types of farming is going to occur. Look at the U.S., and that's the key. That's what we're focusing on. The U.S. is mainly industrialized agriculture. All right, that corporation-owned mass production of agriculture, wheat, corn, big staples there. Your traditional agriculture, your subsistence, you're going to find that in very small places, not a whole lot on a large scale at least, that's going to be found in the U.S. Alright, so let's look at some issues with farming. A big issue with farming is salinization. Okay, and this process occurs where you have over-irrigation. We know that we know our water contains low amounts of salts. Over time, you have over-irrigation on these crop fields, and these salts accumulate up in the soil. Once that water evaporates or leaves through other processes, the soil is going to be left behind, or the salts are going to be left behind in the soil. This allows this salt buildup or this salinization process to increase. Salinization contributes to roughly about a third of the reduction of crop yields in the U.S. So a big problem that crop fields are facing, or one of the big problems, there's many, but one of the big problems is this salinization process where there's so much salt being built up. It's causing this waterlogging process to occur, and it's reducing our annual crop yields in the U.S. up to a third of its total yield. Now there are other problems. When you're looking at crop fields, we're talking about overuse of the soil, the continued tillage of the soil. You have erosion of topsoil, so there's not very much topsoil left as a result of that. That over-irrigation causes runoff. You have a lot of wind in the plains. The plains is a big area where our crop fields are going to be housed just because of the climate and the vast plains network, and so you have loss of topsoil, which is another big factor. You have decrease of nutrients. There's no natural nutrients like nitrogen for soil or for plant growth, and so we over pump nitrogen with our nitrogen fertilizers into the soil. which leads to its own set of issues that we've talked about before. All right, let's get into these techniques. We've got terracing, which is mountainside farming. Terracing is very big because if you live in an area, especially in these smaller communities that are closer to mountains, they can do this mountainside farming, this terracing, and what terracing does is it helps reduce soil loss through erosion and runoff. It helps reduce water loss, the way that they terrace or they build these layers on the sides of mountains. You've got this contour and strip cropping. Okay, very straightforward. Once again, contour and strip cropping allows you to plant different crops in these contour or strip lines. That way you're rotating the soils. This also helps reduce soil erosion and water loss. You've got windbreaks, and windbreaks are big. Notice that they build tree lines around these areas, and windbreaks are big because if you live in an area where your crop fields are exposed to high amounts of wind or large amounts of wind over a period of the growing season, you can build these windbreaks or put in these windbreaks, these tree lines, and that will reduce that amount of wind. And the big thing with that is less wind, less soil erosion. All right, these last couple of slides of information you have in your notes already filled out for you, but this gives you a snapshot of the trade-offs, the advantages and disadvantages of using inorganic commercial fertilizers, those big nitrogen fertilizers. We know it's easy to transport, but it doesn't help build up the humus in the soil. Remember, humus, our natural organic material. Easy to store, easy to apply. Unfortunately, it reduces your ability of your soil to hold water. It reduces the organic matter in your soil. And remember, our organic matter is the big natural fertilizer that helps keep the health of the soil. Your advantages and disadvantages of using genetically modified crops like our corn that's grown in Kansas and Nebraska, all of these huge areas of cornfields in the U.S., those are genetically modified crops. That's a corn, it's a hybrid, it's the same type of corn all over, miles and miles around. The advantages of this, we can use that product for multiple things, not only just food, but other products that we'll get into. It doesn't need as much fertilizer, it doesn't need as much water. They can be more resistant to insects. However, if these plants, these genetically modified plants, were to crossbreed with naturally occurring plants, there's no really good outlook to see what would happen as a result of that. New allergens form from these things. And lower nutrition. Corn, there's hardly no nutrition whatsoever in corn, even though it's a big staple in our food. So hardly any type of nutrition that you get from those. And once an insect breaks that code to get into these hybrids, these genetically modified crops, they have a huge field that everything is the same, and they know how to get that key into the lock in every one of those. So you can have massive crop failures as a result once those insects, and they're bound to be able to do that because it's happened in the past, once they have a way of getting by those built-in genetically modified processes to keep them out. Alright, big things with our crop fields, especially these days. We're trying to do soil restoration. Remember, we've lost over a third of our topsoil. We have almost hardly any topsoil left for growing. So soil restoration is a big thing. Organic fertilizers, putting less inorganic nitrogen into the soil. These organic fertilizers help rebuild humus and natural components. Using animal waste as a natural component is a big way of restoring. Compost is a big way of restoring. Crop rotation. Now, crop rotation, we don't do a whole lot of crop rotation here in the U.S. because most of our areas are used up already. But, and that's an issue that we're facing, but other parts of the world, crop rotation is big because if you can rotate what fields you use crops on to allow fields to have a break, if you will, these crop fields have a break, they don't have to worry about they get a chance to rebuild themselves naturally when you rotate crops. Sustainable agriculture, you have this as well in your notes. Very straightforward. To take away from this, the types of agriculture, how we use it, the goods, the bads, and how it ties into soil.